Welcome to episode 2 of Instructions Not Included, hosted by
Jeff
and Torri, where we'll be diving into difficult topics and situations that millennials like us face and the decisions that we make that end up rewriting and reshaping those traditional norms that we grew up with.
Yeah, I'm excited to get the second episode out, but it is a little difficult managing a newborn and the 2 dogs.
And it's taken us so long
Seriously.
to get this recording started. So again, there's no instructions included starting a podcast and repetitive episodes afterwards. But otherwise, how are you feeling, babe?
Just hearing everybody's good feedback and just how excited they are about this podcast for us, it's really encouraging. And I think today's episode will be a good one, especially for those looking to have a newborn themselves or have a child themselves.
Yeah, and just as a disclaimer, since we will be talking about pregnancy, infertility, touching on miscarriage, definitely want to give a heads up because it is a pretty sensitive topic that can lead to a lot of emotions. But also, even if you yourself don't want kids or you don't think it's in the cards for you, still recommend listening, staying on with us, just because there's likely going to be someone in your circle that is experiencing these types of losses or this type of grief. So this may just give you some insight or, let's say, language to be able to be a better supportive friend or family member, during those times. So
yeah, and I think that's huge because I know for me at least, the idea of pregnancy, miscarriage, that was never really a common topic. Like when I was younger, I thought like, oh, it's so easy to get pregnant. And that's just never been an issue, but it's just because it's just never talked about.
Yeah. And even with us, when we started, we're such planners. And I feel like you thought it was going to be smooth sailing just because I work in the prenatal field. I kind of told, I went to the doctors, I started, start taking prenatal medication, I was working out, trying to stay healthy, but little did we know that it was actually going to be a lot harder than we expected, and that's just something that, why we wanted to talk about this topic today, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge and end up feeling pretty isolated, or they end up feeling pretty down on themselves because they kind of see how, their friends or people in their circle have kids and kind of wonder, why isn't it as easy for us? So the reason why we chose this topic again is to just give a little bit more insight on these vulnerable journeys that couples go through, and to again make you feel like you're not alone in those thoughts. Yeah. So before we go into our own journey, just some facts that I wanted to, or stats that I wanted to bring up is, according to ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, about 15% of cis heterosexual couples will experience infertility. And do you know what infertility actually encompasses? What?
So for me, that's just, there is an issue with your body that doesn't allow you to get pregnant, but I'm sure it's much more than that.
Yeah, so it's basically if you've been trying, without any assistance for at least 12 months, sometimes sooner, depending on your age. So that's kind of what infertility is truly defined as. And about 1 in 4 pregnancies are going to also lead to miscarriage. So it's a lot more common than you probably thought. And again, just because you may be experiencing that doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with you.
It's pretty eye-opening because, like I said, when I was in my teen years, I thought it was so easy to get pregnant. You always have to practice safe sex and protect yourself, and because it's just that easy. But in actuality, it's really not. And I think that the fact that it's never really spoken about, it's just people are unaware of exactly how difficult of a situation it is when you are facing...
when you're finally ready.
I'm sorry?
When you're finally ready.
When you're finally ready and you just can't get pregnant. So not only is that physically draining, but also emotionally, and it does take a toll on both partners in the process.
So by the end of this episode, again, we just really hope to normalize conversation surrounding pregnancy, and again, to just kind of give insight on how you can support someone in your circle or even support yourself or your partner, in that conception process or even after a loss. But before we dive into it,
today's episode of Instructions Not Included is proudly sponsored by the most reliable real estate team, the Rise Group, which is led by us, Jeff and Torri. If you didn't know, we are realtors. We started in Jersey, now we're in Florida, so happy to help. So after doing business throughout New Jersey, our team spread its roots to the Sunshine State to help sellers and buyers reach their real estate goals. If you're looking for agents who will really listen to what you want in a home, you need agents who want to know how to effectively market your home so it sells. We want our clients to feel confident, educated, and at ease when they work with us. Whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, we've got you covered. Send us a DM on Instagram at Jeff and Torri, or visit therisegroupre.com to schedule a free consultation today.
with my background, right, I was super vigilant with pregnancy and just doing everything right so I could get pregnant. And even though I knew that most couples take about 6 months, I expected us to get a positive test like the first time around or the first cycle, right?
I did too.
Yeah, and so that happened to fall right around the time that we came to Tampa and we were looking for houses with our best friends. So it was supposed to be a super exciting time, but the, whole trip in the back of my mind, I'm just like, okay, when can I take a test? When can I take a test? When can I take a test? So you're just always in that anticipation mode. And so I'm just like wondering, as the person who wouldn't be carrying the pregnancy, did you think anything of it? Like that waiting period? Did you even know that there was a waiting period?
Waiting period in terms of getting pregnant?
No, the test.
Oh, no. I definitely didn't know there was a waiting period. Like I said, I feel like I'm like most typical males who are trying to get pregnant with their partner. They don't really know much. We're trying to find guidance from our partner. So I didn't know there was a waiting period. I thought we were going to get pregnant first time around. I thought I could plan for this. Like, oh, we'll get pregnant.
No. As in, like, when we were in Tampa, were you thinking about a pregnancy test at all?
Not necessarily.
Like, was it even crossing your mind?
No.
Because for me, it was crossing my mind every single time. Like, every single symptom that I may feel, I'm like, okay, this is it. And for you, I feel like it's just like, we're just here.
Yeah, and that's just the reality of it, right? I think most guys would agree that we're just not as in tune with the whole pregnancy process as women are, because it is their bodies that is going to be carrying this child, and we're just along for the ride, for lack of a better term, and just trying to provide guidance and support whenever we can.
Do you think that kind of lackadaisical role for the male partner leads to the partner carrying the pregnancy feeling like they have to put on that happy face all the time?
Yeah, I think that's an obvious answer. Like, of course, if this journey is only carried by one person, then it's definitely going to be difficult. That's why I kind of try to get ahead of it, try to educate myself in my best way I can, because I know I'm not going to go through the physical things that you're going to be going through. And I think that it's important as a partner who isn't carrying a child to really just understand what their partner is about to go through and really try to just be supportive as much as we can.
So when we got our first negative test, it was definitely crushing, especially for myself. I remember we went to Walgreens and I was super excited. And then you kind of just, you feel everything and then you get that negative test and it's just the biggest disappointment ever.
And I think from my perspective, I was like, okay, we can just try again. But I think what I don't feel is just that rejection. And I know you've talked about this before, of how you feel like, oh, your body is not capable of getting pregnant and you're just going through all these rejecting thoughts. So to me, that was not even a thing. I was more like, all right, we'll just keep trying until it works.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just half because you are, the male partners are kind of not as physically involved, obviously, but or also it's just your optimistic mindset as well? Do you think it was like both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, optimism definitely played a role, but I think just the lack of knowledge makes me unaware of exactly how difficult it is. So to me, I figured it would happen eventually, but I think for some people it doesn't.
Yeah. So for me, it was just like the moment those negative test results happen, and it's like I text my friends. I've been super open with our journey just because I know how taboo these topics are. Did you tell your friends anything when we were trying to get pregnant? Was that ever part of normal conversation?
I think maybe my closest friends, but at the same time, going back to it, like nobody wants to share their issues. So I think from the knowledge that I had, you don't really want to tell people until you pass the first trimester because you can lose the child. So that was like, all right, I'm just not going to tell anybody till then because I don't want to be embarrassed or share this difficult time until I'm certain that things are going to look optimistic for us.
My view on that is I was open from the beginning because why has it been normalized that we keep that a secret and only share good news? Why
Yeah,
is that
that's fair.
something that, as the person carrying the pregnancy, why is that only my experience to bear on my own? I don't think it's fair that is it like, do you think it's for the comfort of other people? Like,
No, I think people just don't like to be embarrassed and people don't like to put themselves in situations where they look lesser of a person than they normally are, I think. And before, like, we
or
got
do you think
together.
it's also a fear of like not wanting to feel like a burden to other people?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want, like, oh, I don't have to share my problems with you. Everybody has their problems. So, yeah, absolutely, I would say
Yeah,
so.
I think that's honestly, while the, keeping up with the Joneses probably definitely does play a role in that because, you see all your friends getting married and getting houses, having a baby is definitely part of that. But from my perspective, it's also a matter of not wanting to be a burden and not wanting to share the negative things going on in your life because you kind of grow up being like, suck it up. This is something that you just keep to yourself. And that's definitely something that I myself have always wanted to, what's the word I'm looking for? I wanted to kind of go against that because again, as friends, your friend shouldn't only be there for you when it's happy news, right? Friendship is about going through the ups and downs in life because no one in life is going to have only good news all the
Yeah.
time. Those are your party friends. Those are not real friends, right? So to me, being open, no matter what those results ever told us, is something that I wanted to do to try to kind of lead with by example, to be like, if you're going through this, I'm going to be here for you too.
Yeah, and that's huge because I think most people don't feel that way. I know I didn't before you and I started having these conversations about vulnerability and just like being more open with our emotions because I think the older generations have taught us to be strong, no complaints, keep your head down, do what you need to, don't be upset. And that's just not the best way to handle your emotions, especially something as difficult as it is to go through the pregnancy process.
Yeah, and that's why, it's always at this, in 2023, there's so many questions that the, people who are older than us will ask that are just like, please don't ask those questions
Oh my
anymore,
God, when are you going to get pregnant? When
Yeah,
are you going
like,
to get
are you
married?
pregnant? Like the
Like,
moment
why
that a
don't you have
couple
a
gets
baby yet?
married.
Like, I want a grandkid, or like things like that they don't realize what the kind of pressure it puts on you.
Yeah, and not just the pressure, but it's also just like it kind of disregards like what if that person is already going through it? What if they are pregnant and what if they just found out some, really horrible news about their pregnancy, or what if they just lost their pregnancy?
Or
You
even
know?
in today's society where everything is so expensive, some people may not even be able to afford being pregnant, but they want to,
Yeah.
and they're capable of it. It's just now it's a financial issue. There's just so many
True.
factors that go into it.
I didn't think about it that way, of like, maybe some people just want to be prep essentially financially, right, before
Yeah.
they even consider having kids these days.
Diapers are expensive.
What?
Diapers are
Oh yeah,
expensive.
we know about that. Luckily, our neighbor across the street gifted us
Shout out
diapers.
Zach.
So I'm not even gonna go into that. One man's, what is it?
One man's trash is one man's treasure.
Yeah, never mind. Anyway, we digress. So, this stuff that people say to you that just like adds to it. So, you know, some people, in my experience, just in our journey, someone had repeatedly asked me, are you pregnant? Are you pregnant yet? And the way that I just approached it is, this person doesn't really know any better. So let me just set my own boundaries, so they will know about it. But so just because you do doesn't mean that they're going to get it. But basically every time this person would ask me, are you pregnant yet? I would just say, you know what? I'm not. You will be one of the first people that we do tell. To just kind of be like, please get off my back. You have no idea what we're going through every day, what I'm going through mentally every day. But let me just make sure you're still in the loop. But sometimes, again, just
and that's
doesn't
why
work.
I think our generation really kind of became more aware, and those questions are not really asked by people who are currently in their 30s and 40s because they understand the difficulties of it. So I'm proud of that as coming from the millennial generation and younger, because I think people are just educating themselves. There's more information out there to get educated, so we just know not to do that.
Yeah. But it was still difficult. And again, as someone who's even in the field, so I can't even imagine for someone who's not in the medical field, what they may be going through there, if there's no one that's telling them like, this is more common than you think. It's, I don't know.
I think, I mean, the fact that you had a medical background, I was more prepped for what to expect. If you didn't provide that for me, this would have been a more anxiety driven, more confusing journey to go through. So that education definitely created a foundation for how to navigate the journey of pregnancy. But for a lot of people who don't and are just going into it kind of blind, it can be overwhelming, especially on top of your day job, on top of your family issues, financial issues, and everything in between. So when we started the journey of being pregnant, we had to make sure those areas of our lives were taken care of, because this was something that we knew was going to be difficult.
And on the flip side, knowing too much also put a lot of stress on me, because working with patients who are going through infertility, I think it's called like the implicit bias. Is that what it is? Where basically, because I'm exposed to it all the time, I think it's more possible than it actually is. So it really affected my day-to-day life, because every time I would meet with a patient, I was kind of reminded of what we were going through, the anticipation, and just kind of over empathizing with the patients, meaning like, sympathy is kind of like understanding what that person is going through, versus empathy is putting yourself in their shoes. I kind of was like overly putting myself in their shoes.
And that's why it's like a double-edged sword. So it can be helpful, like I would say in our situation, but it does also have that detrimental value as well. So every journey is going to be different. So whether you think you're ready or you have knowledge or you're prepared, you're not. Because this is just something that you can't really prepare for. And that's what every parent has told us before we got pregnant, after we had our newborn, and it's continuously learning because it's a unique journey for every parent.
Yeah. And so for me, I know the thoughts that would always come into my head is that, again, I'm broken, I'm not living up to my role as your wife. my body is failing me. You know, how is it so easy for so and so to get pregnant? You know, those were the constant thoughts in my head. And so what was that like, babe, for you to kind of see me crying or to kind of be so down on myself like that?
A little helpless at times, I'd say. I mean, because there's nothing I could do. I mean, I can't carry the burden of your pain, the rejection that you feel. I couldn't really provide encouragement in a way that you were looking for. And all I could try to do is just make you smile, make you laugh, and just try to keep you in a better mood. But aside from doing those things, I know that sometimes it's just not enough. And then it's just trying to navigate that situation as best as possible.
Did you ask for, let's say, like the girls, your girlfriends, did you ask for any like advice?
Yeah. I have a couple of close girlfriends who I felt comfortable talking to, and I really appreciated the advice they had to offer. And that's the only insight I could have gotten. I can't ask a
What was the
guy.
advice?
It's just to be there for you, just to understand how difficult of a time this is, and just to really be patient. Because of course, like anybody, I'd be frustrated. Like what I'm trying to do is not helping you out, and I'm feeling helpless because I can't help you. But it's important for me to not get frustrated in that moment and also dump that emotion onto you on top of everything else.
Yeah, because I think unlike a lot of people, I was very open with those emotions all the time. And it definitely was a heavy period of time, just because I think, especially after negative tests, like anything would just make me cry. If you remember, we were like, we were actually leaving a brokerage that we were working with, and I just started crying in the middle of his, like the Zoom meeting, just because I already saw disappointment in the face of the person we were speaking with. So I was just like, great, another person I'm disappointing, on top of my husband.
And yeah, and that caught me off guard. So
Yeah.
like that was like one point where I was like, okay, their emotions are a little heightened, things are a little out of the norm, and that is one situation where I recognize like, whoa, this wasn't a situation to kind of cry for.
Yeah.
But when you did that, I realized, okay, so this is a lot harder for her than I had thought.
Yeah. And, it was just the pressure again that I was putting on myself, because for you as the optimist, you're always like, oh, I'm so excited to, play with our kid, or like to play, teach them how to play sports and, go on all these trips. So the pressure of being the wife and providing, the ability for you to be that father is something that I think a lot of women like myself do carry. And so it really wasn't until like we quote let go, and it's not as easy for a lot of people because sometimes there are biological or genetic reasons why individuals, can't conceive, but that really wasn't something for us. But it was the moment that we quote let go, we thought, okay, let's just focus on moving to Florida. I think that's when the stress levels went down. And, essentially when you're stressed and you're trying to conceive, those cortisol levels are what's kind of blocking the pregnancy, essentially. The cortisols, kind of think of it as like smoke detectors, like the smoke detector goes off and it's kind of just like, okay, run.
And it's kind of crazy how that worked out.
Yeah.
Like as soon as we had kind of given up on trying to get pregnant, knowing that we had a big move ahead of us and buying a house, and we were just like, let's just let it happen when it happens. That's when we got pregnant. And to your point, yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about it constantly and adding that pressure on your body, I think that definitely affected you.
Yeah. And so again, it's definitely a lot easier for those couples where there isn't that type of obstacle. There weren't a history of losses for us or anything. So, but definitely for couples, and this is my genetic counseling, coming in for anyone that's going through difficulty conceiving, whether it's going to an OBGYN, requesting a referral to, we refer to it as an REI or reproductive endocrinologist. those are the specialists that will be able to do the appropriate test to see, could there be, a hormone imbalance? Is there something structurally going on? And not to mention, it's not always the female and body that is leading to the infertility.
Of course.
So a lot of people think that it's always the woman because in certain cultures, it's the woman's fault if they can't, have kids. So just to kind of shed light on that, sometimes it's the male partner, right? Whether it's like, again, biological, there's a genetic issue, both partners need to be tested, not just the woman. So again, that's just my free counseling advice there. But going off of the, letting go thing too, what really got to me, or what kind of like a really deep thing that Jeff said, and this is likely one of like the most profound things that like you've ever said to me that I still think about to this day. I was just crying and crying and crying. I think it was still that same day that we were talking about the Zoom call conversation. I was crying, and I finally opened up to you saying that, because you were kind of like, why is this so hard for you? And I just remember telling you that you want to be a dad so badly, and I just want to give that to you. And Jeff had actually said, quote, because again I hear this in my head all day, you had said, I want to be a dad, but not at the expense of my wife.
Yeah, and I still totally agree with that. I think that if the journey to having a kid was going to be at the expense of you, I don't think it was worth it to me. Like I love being a dad, and being a parent is like the most amazing thing. And I'm very happy that we were able to accomplish that. But during that time, I was not willing to sacrifice your body, your mentality, and the stress that I was going through if that didn't work out for us. So, I mean, if it wasn't in the cards, I was willing to accept that, but I just wanted you to be aware so you would take that burden off of you.
And I think that's where it's super important for the male partners to really step up, because that's what got me to just kind of take a deep breath and kind of reflect and say, oh, and I remember my mom was like, who's putting the pressure on you? No one, you are. And so again, I really recommend that for couples going through, planning for pregnancy or going through trying to conceive right now, for the male partners to really step up, and even the both of you just kind of check in with each other. How are you doing? How is, what's going through your mind? Are we still doing this? Are we still happy right now? So it's just another point in your marriage or just in your relationship where don't sit back and wait for something to happen, but rather really be proactive and ensure that both partners are enjoying essentially this process. This should not be something where only one person is carrying the mental load or the emotional load, something where both people really need to step up, love each other, support each other, and not be scared to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah. And don't limit it to just each other. I mean, look for the support in your close friends, your parents, if you get that support from them, or just anybody who's willing to listen. I feel like these conversations aren't had because we're scared of looking like we're incapable of getting pregnant or looking like a failure, kind of keeping up with the Joneses, like everybody's getting pregnant. Why aren't I? Like that kind of mentality keeps you from having these conversations and puts you in a deeper hole than you would be if you didn't just talk and speak up.
And if you're, let's say, a friend, right? Like I always encourage the language rather than saying, oh, are you guys trying to get pregnant? Or kind of just focus, like if you know a couple that just got married, don't go right into, are you guys trying? I would just say, are there any like updates since you guys married? Like what are your plans? Kind of open-ended questions that allow that friend to either tell you what's going on in a positive light, or even just kind of tell you, we're doing this and it's not going as we planned. So again, open-ended questions really help. And rather than putting that pressure on, are you pregnant already? Are you trying? So
I mean, it's a difficult conversation to navigate. So it does take some time to understand, but I think as you get better communication, this is just something that will require a high level of communication skills to navigate. So it's always about being empathetic and just knowing that the other person that you're speaking to may be going through a difficult situation, even though they're not really showing it, especially when it comes to pregnancy.
Yeah.
Or even anything in life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's just, at this age, everyone's going through their own journeys. Everyone's on their own timelines, which is such a huge reminder. Just because your friends are doing one thing, it doesn't mean that you need to be at that same point in your life. So just don't really rush into it, and don't feel like you're the only person not doing something that you see your friends doing, right? And so it's just so important to be mindful of the conversations that you have with your loved ones, even yourself, and just really being open to hear what each other, is going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just as a kind of summary for everything, right? It's pregnancy is not a one size fit all story by any means. If you think you are having any difficulty, right? So again, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, as the genetic counselor here, don't be afraid to ask your doctors for referrals to a specialist. Again, they're called reproductive endocrinologists. It does not hurt to just get an evaluation. Of course, some people may just kind of want to go through the natural, some people end up getting pregnant after a few years on their own. But if you need kind of like that reassurance, or just kind of need better direction, definitely ask a medical professional, right? But at this point, if you're going through it, just don't feel alone in it. You are not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You are not a failure in this. And we just hope that for those couples that are in the thick of it, that the outcome ends up in your favor. And just know that you are supported through all of this. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be it for us at this episode, because Easton is waking up over there. And so we just want to thank you if you've made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for spending, 30, 40 minutes with us. And if you enjoyed your time, like, rate, review,
Share
it, and subscribe. We're now on Apple Podcasts, YouTube,
Spotify Podcasts, YouTube,
everything.
Google Podcasts. People use that. I'm not sure. Google Podcasts.
I don't know.
But yeah, definitely follow us on Instagram, and we would definitely appreciate the feedback or different topics that you want to share. I think this kind of the reason why we started this podcast, we think there's so many conversations that need to be had that people our age don't. And that's what that's what our intention is with this podcast. So we definitely love to hear
what you want to hear from us.
I hope you guys really find value in what we're talking about. And most importantly, subscribe so we can continue designing
our extraordinary lives together.
Take care until next episode.
Why'd you be?
I got a treat in my hand.
Cut.